Hello, everybody, and welcome to Deep Dive Zone, a Sonic the Hedgehog rewatch podcast for fans of all shapes and sizes. But now we're gonna be talking about SatAM, or the ABC Sonic cartoon, or just Sonic the Hedgehog. I really wish they had given this one a unique name.
Yeah, I guess that's why the fans gave it one.
Yeah, well, actually, I think literally the network and the ads themselves were calling it SatAM at a certain point, but then that makes it a really dumb name.
I mean, it is kind of, because, it's the Saturday morning Sonic cartoon. It's a little, I don't know. Yeah, it works.
I suppose. So I never got to see this show as a kid, for the most part. Maybe I saw a couple episodes when we first got Netflix, but it was one of those shows that went off and on different services for a long time, so...
Yeah.
We're just going to be talking about the first 5 episodes, which includes the pilot at the start tonight. But in any case, I've grown to like this show quite a bit. I think the opening is really strong. Fastest Thing Alive is a good song.
Yeah, that was actually one of the first things I wanted to say. The opening kind of slaps. Or not kind of, it really slaps. It's good.
It's pretty good, I think. It's definitely an improvement over Adventures, kind of just a mindless whatever. Honestly, I must say, this show, going from Adventures to SatAM, it's like the shows are almost polar opposites.
Yes.
They really are. It's like going from McDonald's to like a $50 steak.
They're like Adventures feels like it's just kind of meandering most of the time. Whereas this show, right off the bat, it's like it knows what it's doing and how it wants to do it.
Yeah. In an era where SEGA of America was not really sure how to turn the classic games into a real story, this feels like the most thought out and sensibly constructed attempt, even if it wasn't really analogous to what the games would end up doing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, what the games would end up doing, I guess. At the time, the games weren't really that in-depth. So I think it's fair enough to take liberties.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that even though it didn't turn out the same way that the games did, given what they had to work with, they did a good job.
Yeah, it's funny. It obviously sets out to do something different. As a kid, I think I might have seen an episode or maybe just clips of this show, and I was like, oh, what is this? This isn't my happy, fun, colorful Sonic. It's like dark and gritty, and Robotnik sounds demonic. Get that away from me. But now, at the age I am now, I dig it for all those reasons.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And wild as it is, this show started airing 2 weeks after Adventures of Sonic started airing.
Really? Wait, so they're airing at the same time?
Shows were both airing at the same time. Could not be that different.
Imagine the whiplash. You're a kid who's only seen a few episodes of Adventures, and I like my happy-go-lucky cartoon with my favorite blue hedgehog, and then this show starts, ooh, more Sonic, and you get just a complete whiplash with the tone.
And a barrage of characters you've never met before.
Yeah, that too. Which is an interesting way of doing things, but not an uncommon way of for cartoons of that era to just suddenly start throwing characters at you.
No, I think if we're gonna, let's get into the pilot episode here, Heads or Tails. As an introductory episode, I think it actually works pretty well for most of the characters.
I sure wish I'd watched it as the first episode. I watched it as the 5th episode.
Ooh. Heads or Tails. Sonic reluctantly takes Tails with him to the big city to find some cotter pins for the Freedom Fighters' catapults. While in the city, Sonic is nearly eaten alive by his old dog Mutsky, now a roboticized guard dog in the junk heaps. Later, while escaping some SWAT bots, Sonic and Tails overhear Robotnik explaining his plan to defoliate the Great Forest with a chemical spray and reveal Not Whole Village. So the pilot episode, it is a little different, even though it did air, on normal TV. They aired it as the end of Season 1 instead of the start of the show. But it is different. It looks different, and they've got a couple different bits of iconography. This episode has buzz bombers in it, for example, which I thought would be in the rest of the show, but nope.
Are they not?
Just this episode. Not. They're all over the place in the comics, which is what I remembered.
Okay, because I recognize the design. Yeah, from the comics, that makes sense. Which leads me into, when you were saying this show introduces a bunch of characters, I was going to say, and I don't mind that, but that's because I'm probably already familiar with them. That's probably the reason. So it's awesome to see all of them. Probably just knowing the games, it would be a little strange.
I just meant if you had gone to this from Adventures, you would be caught off guard by all these different characters.
Sure. There are 3 overlapping characters.
We start off with Robotnik, and it's very odd because at the very start, like, his ship computer or whatever says, like, now returning to planet Mobius or something, and so it's like, was he in space?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, you said that before me. I had the same thoughts.
same.
Yeah, I mean, it jumps out, doesn't it? I think there's one episode in space later, spoilers, but it doesn't really explain what he would have been
Oh,
doing away from the planet.
I think that's just one of those pilotisms we're never going to have a concrete answer to.
I
Yeah,
guess so.
probably.
Sonic himself is introduced just kind of messing around, trying to, like, perfect his guitar technique to, I guess, I don't know if he's, like, trying to woo Sally or just impress her or what.
The precursor to Sonic Underground. It's the guitar.
That's the thing that I kept thinking about every time Sonic whipped out the guitar in this show. He does it a couple times in other episodes.
Interesting.
Sonic
I mean,
Underground never directly references Axl Rose, though.
yeah, that was a little weird.
They should have saved the Guns N' Roses references for the Mega Man crossover.
Yeah, this show is interesting because there's kind of 2 sides to it. A lot of the time, it's like dark and cold. That's like all through the introduction as you see Robotnik fly in and it sort of presents his empire and you're like, oh. But then it switches to the Freedom Fighters and then suddenly Sonic's cracking jokes and whipping his arms around at like a million miles an hour. It looks so hilarious, by the way.
You guys are awfully chipper for living in this, post-apocalyptic mecha world.
It's an interesting choice to go that route because even if they were just like taking the games and expanding it, that actually is not in line with the games, really. In the games, Robotnik never tends to have a huge grip, but in this, he's like conquered everything practically.
Yeah,
They're literally the Freedom Fighters.
right. Robotnik's already won.
And that's the one thing that I do like about the opening is that they have that little shot with, like, the flyby of his big flying fortress or whatever, and it just carries the entire Robotropolis behind it. It makes it seem really intimidating, and that's very helped by Jim Cummings' performance as the character in this show.
Oh God, yes.
Yes, I love that.
He's having so much fun being evil.
Oh, he does such a good job. Also,
But to get back to your original point, I have to imagine that they're all chipper as a coping mechanism, perhaps, or Sonic doesn't really take the threat seriously because that's another thing too.
Yeah, the guy still displays a lot of confidence in this show, doesn't he?
yeah, well, I assume it's just because he's confident he can stop Robotnik or reverse.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I'm
everything.
complaining that they're not all depressed.
Oh no!
I mean, it's a kids show.
No, of course. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's still a kids show. They shouldn't all just be rolling around in misery.
But yeah. So Sonic's just kind of goofing off, and Rotor is there. He's purple for this episode and this episode only. The rest of the show he's blue.
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't even know that I noticed that.
that
Yeah,
was kind of
they mess
interesting.
around with the character designs across the show a little bit. But they head back to Knothole Village. They go down the Great Oak Slide to get there, which
Why is there a slide that just leads you to the surface again?
whatever, doesn't matter. We can see Tails in a little bit here, and I don't mind Tails in this show or anything, but I think he's a downgrade from before, to be honest, because he's just a little kid in this show.
That's true.
Well,
He doesn't
yeah.
really do anything.
Well, they don't really take him on missions, except for in this episode where things start to go badly.
Right.
Ironically, in Adventures, due to the smaller cast of characters, he kind of was forced to actually be more active in that show because he was basically the only one that could fall back on if Sonic didn't take the stage. But in this one, there's so many characters to juggle in the Freedom Fighters that kind of makes more sense.
It's a shame because I do like the aesthetic of Tails riding in the backpack. I'm not sure it makes sense with the scale of the characters, but I do think it looks cute.
Yeah, it does look cute. But I mean, the same question we had about Robo Sonic from Adventures.
Pseudo Sonic.
Thank
It's just
you.
a cartoonism.
Yeah, I know. It's at the end of the day, who cares?
Yeah, I actually kind of wish that Sonic had a backpack or something in the game so that it wasn't like the Sonic 06 problem where it looks like he pulls the Chaos Emerald right out of his ass. But we get to be introduced to our other characters, so we get to see who's next. I think Bunny shows up next.
I didn't write down exact orders. You're really an overachiever here. But yeah, Bunny, I think it's really great to have a character that's like partially roboticized in the crew because that once again sort of takes advantage of the atmosphere that's been presented. Like, oh, wow, this is serious. Like some of them have like partially robots. And then that just makes it interesting variety.
I agree, but it does make some things weird because I'm so used to the idea that Bunny was a person, she was in the roboticizer and got saved partway through the process, and that's why she's only part roboticized. But she's already roboticized here, and I don't know of any scenes in other parts of the show where we actually see what happened to her. So it's like you just left to speculate, I guess, as opposed to the comics where it happens literally the moment Sonic meets her.
Well, there are actually a number of unanswered questions in the show because it got canceled. Spoilers.
Well, yes. I guess that might be the excuse to a lot of the problems, because the other thing that I was going to say is that Bunny feels like they should have used her as a character more, because she doesn't really have any episodes to herself, to my knowledge. I guess I haven't seen the last 3, but I'm pretty sure they're not.
I don't think so.
Maybe for our last chunk of SatAM, I'll look up some of Ben Hurst's projected plans for the series, because he did talk about them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The other characters we get to introduce to... Let's talk about Antoine. I've had enough of this fucker already.
Yeah, I know you hate Antoine. I actually kind of like Antoine because I always root for the underdog.
I guess I just haven't watched enough of the show yet.
Here's the thing. I don't hate Antoine. I just hate this Antoine.
Oh, okay. Well...
I like him later, into the mid-2000s.
Yeah, true. He barely ever helps at all in the show and is in fact actually a hindrance much of the time.
He tends to be a bit of a liability, yeah.
However, he tries a lot of the time, so I'm not inclined to hate him just because he's unskilled.
Yeah, no, neither am I, but I think that there's more that you can do with a character like that. I'll give props to Robert Paulson, though. He definitely pulls off a fitting voice for the character. Which it's Robert Paulson, so it's like, of course he does, but...
Again, I'm probably biased from the comics. We'll talk about Antoine a little more later anyway. He has an episode to himself. Spoilers. So
yes, he does.
Then we'll have we can evaluate him in more detail then. But for now, he doesn't really bother me. And in fact, I find some of his misinterpretation of language to be amusing.
That is kind of funny.
And then, of course, finally, we are introduced to the leading lady, Princess Sally Acorn. She's good. I like her.
Yeah.
Sally is the best. Sally is like the first character I've seen in any of these shows that looks at Sonic's joking attitude and just completely stonewalls it like, no, I'm not going to take your stupid jokes. I'm just going to ignore that and respond seriously and call you out when you're being dumb.
Yeah, the two of them have a nice rapport. They kind of got a back and forth where they both kind of snark at each other, but it's all from a place of endearment.
Right.
It's surprising how well they get along with how much they actually argue. We skipped past Bunny before I got a chance, but I find it funny that Bunny has a tendency to just be sweet on everyone, regardless. She always is so calling everyone sugar or whatever. I think that's cute.
She's just very nice. She's got that southern hospitality.
That's what I was gonna say.
Exactly.
That southern friendliness.
So what do you guys think about the Lake of Rings thing?
The little strange, because I thought the rings were created. That's I don't know.
Yeah, so this is a really weird thing, is that they say Uncle Chuck invented rings, but they also say that, they just come out of this water and we don't really know how it works. Well, which is it?
Okay, so they do actually explain that later.
I know, but at this point it seems weird, and I'm not sure even at the point where they do explain it that the characters themselves know. It just kind of happens.
Honestly, and I know this from the comics, so yeah, they're supposed to be artificial, but they're also they kind of just do whatever the plot wants them to do, too. That kind of annoys me, but that's later.
Yeah, in this show, they're just kind of a give power thing, which I guess is the best interpretation from the game that you can get.
But only to Sonic, which actually is against the games, because Tails can use the rings, too, and presumably anyone could, I would think. Yeah. But no, they were invented by Uncle Chuck to specifically work for Sonic. I'm not sure why I guess so that then Robotnik can't use them, except I think he actually finds a way to use them later anyway. So why not
He has
just
some
let anyone
power
use
things,
them?
yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, well, yeah, Sonic takes Tails on his mission into Robotropolis to get the pins for the catapults? Catapults. What do you guys think of Robotropolis?
It
No.
looks cool.
Yeah,
It's
no, I
distinct.
dig it.
It's dangerous, it's grimy.
I think
There's...
I mentioned to you, Devin, that it reminds me of like 90s cyberpunk anime.
Yeah, it has a little bit of that. It has, like,
Well,
well, it's
it's
like,
got
it's
that
not really Ghost in the Shell, but it's got the same color palette as it.
right. It's got the whole, I don't want to say slogan, but the description of cyberpunk is usually low life but high tech. I think that's a good
Yeah.
description of Robotropolis.
Yeah, they really got that nice, like, sci-fi, but with good practical effects feel. Not
Right.
necessarily Star Wars, but like a Roger Corman thing going on.
Mm.
The other thing that I do like is that Sonic, like, his power has much more established limits in this show. He can't just take out an army of robots with nothing.
Yes, I like that Sonic actually has his limits.
Until he pulls out a power ring. But
Well, no.
but yeah, no. Well, because they give him an actual group of companions, the writers realize that it would be kind of ridiculous to just make Sonic a one-man army. I definitely appreciate that.
But it does lead to, like, oh, Tails' one thing was that he was good with mechanics, but then they give that to Rotor and even sometimes to Sally in this show.
Yeah, it's kind of a dual role there.
What do you think about Sonic having a pet dog?
It's like Mickey having a pet dog.
Yeah.
I never really thought about it until people pointed it out, similar to Mickey and Pluto.
I guess. But Sonic manages, I don't think he doesn't use the ring to make Mutsky, like, become docile and recognize him now. He just kind of convinces him to, which is really weird given the way we have roboticization working throughout the rest of the series.
Oh yeah, well, this is the pilot, so I guess you can forgive that a little bit, but you're right.
It's kind of funny even in the batch of episodes that we watched for this episode, where he does have to use the ring.
It's just the power of friendship, temporarily.
Robotnik, like, gives his deforestation plan to just a bunch of his robots, which is a little weird. You'd think that's just be a program that he runs. I guess it's just so that Sonic and Tails can see it.
Right.
Okay, so that I have no problem, and it actually leads to a bit of comedy too. I totally am just taking it as he doesn't quite, not to the same extent as Adventures Robotnik by any means, but definitely SatAM Robotnik is very proud of themselves. So I can totally see them just lining up a bunch of SWAT bots just so they can proudly declare their plan. And then I like the bit when they're like, then my buzz bombers, under Snively's direction, will use the spray. Like, he's so excited about what he's doing. And I like how he's like, I don't care one bit about what Snively's doing. It's all about him and what he's got planned.
Yeah, no, Snively is like, he's like the equivalent of, like, gas station sushi to everyone in this show. Because he's not as threatening as Robotnik, but he's also not respected.
I'm glad we can talk a little about Snively. He'll obviously come up more later, but this is another character I like. Really, for a similar reason, I like Antoine because I just root for the underdog. Yeah, he's obviously not to the extent of like Scratch and Grounder, but looked down on by Robotnik, yet still kept around, which is interesting. I always found it strange that like, oh, what? Robotnik has a like non-robot companion in this continuity. Oh, because it's his nephew. So I guess there's some very small amount of like, family value, I guess. Maybe there's some pride in his lineage or something, but obviously Robotnik is still definitely looks down on Snively. But must have some sort of respect somewhere. Because, at times you can see Snively has some capabilities.
Right. Well, I would say that Snively is still smarter than most of the other robots, so it's just that he needs another pair of hands around.
That's true. He does serve to sort of control things when there's too much for him to oversee himself.
Yeah, and Snively is sort of... He's sort of the treachery of someone like Scratch and Grounder made to make sense, because he doesn't actually enjoy being around his uncle. There's maybe a couple moments where they get to be evil together, and I actually really enjoy those. I like to see them bond over shittiness. But he legitimately is like, one day I'm gonna wring your throat out and take your job. And
It's
I
the
like that.
best dynamic. It's amazing.
He's got kind of a Starscream energy about him.
Mm-hmm. That's a good description. I like that.
No family resemblance at all, though.
Not particularly.
When Sonic and Tails enter Robotropolis, I love how this show is in the pilot, I think really well, piece by piece, showing sort of the different elements in this show. As they come in, and then Tails is like, what are all those robots walking by that you can see? Oh, those aren't swap bots. Those are like animal robots. And then Sonic explains, before Muskie shows up, those used to be people. And it's like, oh, that's what we're working with. Okay.
Oh, you know what? That's probably why Tails is just a little kid in this show, is that he's an audience surrogate for the kids watching so that they can explain stuff to him.
Yeah.
Probably.
I will say, Tails has got a different voice actor. They got a different kid to voice him for this show. I'm assuming because child labor laws meant the kid they got for Adventures couldn't do it. But because of the nature of this show, you would have characters yell a little bit more often, and the kid they got to voice him is not good at screaming at all. He just goes, Sonic! Instead of, actually yelling.
Mm-hmm. Robotnik has a pet bird, Cluck, that they care for, which doesn't show up very often for some reason. Spoilers, but I do like it when it's there. Like, the one thing Robotnik can care for is one of his own creations. Perfect.
Makes enough sense.
He does okay. I was about to say he respects his own robots a little bit more in this than in Adventures, and that is true, but still not a ton. I think he's still prone to smashing them when he gets angry.
No, that's true, but it's like the only thing he could possibly have as a pet is a robot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the music themes in the background I noticed was also used in Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. So I guess that goes to show that they were airing around the same time if they would reuse stuff like that.
Anything like that.
I could find it.
Bad dog, Muskie! Mondo bad dog! You're supposed to be Hedgehog's best friend!
Junior! He's in the way! No!
Contrasting with the cold and dark design of most of Robotnik's inventions is the hedgehog-seeking missile. It's like designed to look like Sonic.
Oh yeah, that thing is straight out of Adventures of Sonic.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. And then the last thing is that after the Freedom Fighters have to make an actual plan, which, yes, so refreshing to not just be like, oh, we'll just come up with something stupid, which, okay. I mean, he does just use the power ring to get out of one thing, but in the end, they do have to come up with some sort of plan. And the Buzz Bombers are defeated. Interestingly, Robotnik seems to be ordering them to keep attacking, but the Buzz Bombers leave of their own accord, which is giving me, like, Adventures flashbacks, but I'm pretty darn sure everything obeys him to the letter except for this one instance. So that's kind of an outlier.
And it's pilot, so it's a little bit excusable.
Yeah.
Overall, a pretty good introduction to the series, I'd say.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, that we can move on if you would like.
All right. Episode 1, Sonic Boom. Sonic and the Freedom Fighters journey to Robotnik's underground airbase in a mission to reprogram the launch data on Robotnik's fleet of StealthBot aircrafts. While attempting to reprogram the StealthBot computer system, Sally receives a computerized message she believes is from her father, indicating that he may be located somewhere within the Dark Swamp. Despite Sonic's warnings, Sally and Antoine set off on a dangerous mission to find Sally's father, during which they're detected by Robotnik's radar system and lured into an underground trap. So we start sort of right in on the action here with them actually on a mission to Robotropolis. Sonic, Sally, Antoine, and Cat, which is a good name for a guy who is just a cat.
Can you tell who among these few will not show up again?
Yeah. I admire the Freedom Fighters because I think SEGA of America probably had some influence on making them, at least mildly consistent with Sonic. But some of the other SatAM side characters are just like, oh, we needed a RAM guy, so we designed this one,
Right.
I'm probably used to it. It's probably because I'm used to it, but I don't really care.
It's not bad. It's just, a little generic comparatively.
I suppose so. right at the beginning, the opening of the show has this sweet little like pseudo techie read off on the screen as it opens up from the perspective of a stealth orb, which I think is kind of nice.
Yeah, he's got cameras all over the place. It actually makes sense that he'd be an evil empire dictator.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, like, so do you think the king... So he sent this message to Sally, but how did he know that she'd get it from Robotropolis?
Okay, I guess if we're getting into that, so this kicks off the arc where we search for Sally's father, but unlike Sonic Underground, they will be found.
The thing is, in Sonic Underground, there's a prophecy that something about the four of them being together, I guess because they've all got magic medallions or whatever, will make it so that they can defeat Robotnik. I don't know what the significance of finding King Acorn is supposed to be, though, because he's just some guy.
Sally just misses her father, that's all you need.
I don't know, it always seemed to imply to me that finding him would help them defeat Robotnik, and I guess he's probably a good strategist, but...
I mean, the way that Sonic dissuades Sally from searching the prison because it's all dangerous makes me think that not everyone is on board. This is literally just Sally's decision to search for Acorn.
That's fair. I'll tell you what does piss me off, is that Sonic goes and he finds, oh no, Cat's been kidnapped, and it's like, Sally and Antoine went that way. He doesn't break his friend out before going to find them, though.
Cat literally says, "There's no time, go after your friends."
But there is time.
No, I mean, I know, but if you suspend your disbelief a little bit, it's not really shown very accurately, but yes.
Guy who is a little bit too into making the heroic sacrifice.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
So they go to the prison, they find the message, or what computer the message was sent from, some rocks break it, they get attacked by a big monster.
There's a great moment for Robotnik when he's interrogating Cat, and Cat's like, "I'm telling you nothing about nothing, Robotnik," and then Robotnik's like, "Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that, old boy. I have machines of all kinds, marvelous machines that can do things you would not believe." It's just perfect.
Yeah, you just put torture on the table here for this.
Exactly. No, it's this episode that introduces Nicole. You mentioned it before, but they don't show up until this episode. And they're kind of just an endless database of information for some reason. I can kind of come with an explanation for this later. But at the time, it's just kind of there.
She downloaded Wikipedia.
You're saying Nicole's basically just a plot device for explaining things to us.
I mean, that is out of universe explanation.
Right, out of universe, of course. I don't.
Because this is going to be the weird thing, is that me and Lauren know a ton of the plot twists and changes to these characters, but Bruce doesn't.
Yeah, I'm watching these as we review them, so I'm watching them 5 episodes at a time instead of binging all of it, even though I kind of wanted to.
I was gonna do the same thing, but then I was like, oh wait, I forgot this show is good, so I just kept going.
Yeah, I had the problem. I had the problem with Adventures where I watched some of the episodes 2 weeks before we talked about them, so I didn't have a whole lot to say because I took really bad notes and I just didn't remember a lot of the episode.
Comments, notes, it's all the same in between, whatever that means,
Yeah.
I don't know. Why does Sonic know that the big monster that attacks them is a robot?
He had a guess, but I don't remember what it was. He had a theory.
I think he actually... Because they literally ask him, but I don't remember what his explanation was.
Yeah, he explains it, but I cannot remember what his explanation was.
If he believed that they were heading into a trap, then he would have a reason to assume that the Beast is a robot, because it'd be a trap set by Robotnik. Does that also mean that the message itself was a trap?
That kind of was my suspicion,
but
the bit of cloth on the ground kind of seems to imply, no, Max was here. Although that could have been planted by Robotnik.
That could have very easily been planted.
Don't call him Max. His name isn't Max yet.
Well, I'm just... Reflex.
Listen, this is very important, because as of right now, he is just called King Acorn, and he is only allowed to be called Max under certain contexts, and in other contexts he's called Nigel.
What?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
The name Maximilian Acorn is let's just say owned by somebody else. And they then had to rename him to Nigel later on, which is funny because he's named after Nigel Thornberry because they're both voiced by Tim Curry.
Okay, you know what? They're King Max to me. Get off my case.
All right. You know what? The context of the message being a trap is also funnier, because it's like the king's pet name for Sally was Bean, but now that it's coming from Robotnik, it's a reference to Mean Bean Machine.
When the bridge falls down in front of Ironlock, I swear I can hear a voice saying like, ah, sploosh. I listened to it like 3 times, and I'm like, I can't tell if it's just my brain being weird, but I have to bring it up.
Is it Antoine? Alright, I went and looked this up, and Lauren is totally right. It's not Antoine. There is a very soft voice that whispers sploosh when the bridge crashes down. Here, listen to it for yourself.
I hate how mean Sonic is to Antoine. That's my least favorite part about the character, which has nothing to do with the character, actually. But, like, Sonic is like, alright, any questions? And Antoine's about to ask questions. He's like, alright, good. Like, he's just a savage.
I kind of find it funny. It's kind of a double-edged sword for me, because on the one hand, it's like, I don't like Sonic needlessly antagonizing people, but on the other hand, I don't know why Antoine even comes on these missions. He clearly doesn't want to be there.
Well, see, my explanation for why Tails is just a kid is because some people who survived the apocalypse weren't, like, fighters, and you can assume some of them became fighters later, but not everyone is going to. So I have to imagine that, like, the list of people who actually are qualified for these missions are slim, so Antoine comes by necessity just because they need someone else, and he's the closest one.
I suppose that makes sense, especially given Cat seems like kind of an older guy, and he also G-rated dies in this episode. So
that's right. At the end, Sonic is like, he will be avenged.
Which is like,
really shows
he's roboticized, probably, so...
The show is serious about the stakes.
Episode 2, Sonic and Sally. During a mission to one of Robotnik's factories, Sally's taken prisoner by Robotnik and Snively, who construct a roboticized Sally clone, complete with Sally's personality and mannerisms. This double tricks Sonic into rescuing Sally, I'm doing air quotes each time I say it like that, whose tracking device enables Robotnik to monitor the hedgehog's every move. Sally goes undetected by all of the freedom fighters except for Tails, whose intuition tells him this is not the Sally he knows and loves. Also, it's not his intuition, he sees her with laser beams coming out her eyes.
But he suspects her before that, too.
That's fair. That's just because the funny kiss.
There was nothing funny about that at all.
And the fact that she doesn't know where they left off in the bedtime story.
Which, I mean, I don't know where I've left off in most of the stories I read. That's not that weird.
Okay, so I guess if we're jumping right into that part, skipping ahead. So, yeah, Robotnik makes a copy of Sally that is, like, almost perfect, which is a real breath of fresh air after the other show, like, with disguises that fool people needlessly, but this disguise is actually incredibly convincing. But to the point that I'm actually like, why is it missing a few things when it was literally like modeled directly off of Sally and has a lot of her mannerisms? Why does it just forget a few things relevant only to Tails?
Maybe it only knows the things that Robotnik knows about her, because like it doesn't know where her house is, because Robotnik's never been to Nuthole.
Oh, you're right. Okay. I suppose that makes sense.
Which would imply that Robotnik is actually very understanding and very good at reading people, which he does not display very much.
When Bunny is hiding before Sally gets captured, there are a few swap-outs flying overhead, and they're like, oh, heat traces detected, and one of them is like, substation electricity interferes with the heat sensor, ignore it. Like, 2 seconds later, so I don't even understand the point of the exchange. It's like it raises the stakes for a split second, and then they just ignore it.
Like, if these guys were stormtroopers, it would make sense, but they're robots. Like, you're designed to check on that stuff.
Right.
So, a lot of this show, you know, as much as anything else, it's fairly believable, but in this episode, the plot armor starts to show pretty obviously. When Sally gets left behind and Sonic wants to rush back and rescue her immediately, but everyone else is like, no, you have to get a power ring first. I'm like, no, he should have gone immediately. He is incredibly lucky that Robotnik just happens to decide, oh, wait, let me use Sally for a different sort of a plan. And then, for no reason, it's just like, boom, oh, wow, the roboticizer malfunctioned.
I think if they had had some better reason to keep Sonic from getting there, it wouldn't have been as contrived. Like,
that said, after the initial setup, it is decently tense as he's working on, Snively is repairing the roboticizer, like, oh, the clock's ticking.
They should have had them break the roboticizer somehow when they were there at the start.
Yeah. It just, the launch into the setup feels a little contrived.
Actually, maybe that's what the bombs were for. I don't know.
Well, the idea is that they didn't work for some reason. I don't remember how it worked exactly, but the plan didn't quite go through because of Sally getting caught.
There's a part later on where, Sonic does like a Robotnik impression to activate a voice-activated door, and his Robotnik impression is not very good, but what I like is that the door only opens once he threatens it, which does make sense for Robotnik.
That part is absolutely hilarious. That was in my notes as well.
And it's also funny because even if you say that that's too, like, cartoonish, it's also a trap, so they could just be letting him in.
Devin, are you reading my notes? I was about to be like, but he won't say this next observation of mine, and then you said the next observation of mine as well.
I have a micro USB cable that leads down, like, the nape of your neck and goes directly into my forehead. I know you haven't really seen it, because it's been in there for a few weeks now, but that's what I did.
Gosh darn it, every time during the Adventures run when we had the same notes, you were just reading mine.
Yeah, I had to get a few extension cables because he kept driving to work, but,
Okay.
I don't know what this bit is. It's weird.
Point is, I saw that and I had the exact same observations, and I appreciate it just as you do.
I'll tell you what I don't appreciate. I hate episodes like this, where Tails, or just any character, usually a kid character, but I hate episodes of shows where they're really upset about something, and there's something that they're really scared of, and they tell, the responsible older characters, and they just don't believe them.
Yeah, I mean, it's infuriating. I think
That
that's the
shit pisses
point.
me off to no end. Like, I'm thinking of a Steven Universe episode that does the same thing, which is not really like this show at all, but, like, I'm sure there's more examples. The only show to ever get it right is fucking Adventure Time, when he tells Finn, and then Finn believes him, but he just doesn't care.
I'll have to look closely to see if Sonic gets better about that somehow. Although I feel like it doesn't really come up again.
No, I don't think that they really have anything else like that in the show. I feel like it's almost bad messaging, as if you have a kids show, then telling people that you know to be responsible and who love you, they should portray that as a thing that's just innately good, not something that will lead to problems.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not a monster in my closet scenario, it's a guy who they know can make robots, and potentially ones that are really good automaton doubles. I don't know.
I mean, they don't necessarily know that. It's hard to say what went on before episode 1, but certainly later on it's shown that Robotnik has the potential for making new diabolical inventions. So I don't think it's a stretch that this is his first robot copy.
Yeah.
Anyway, point taken. On a different note, this is something I really appreciate about this show. Similar to Adventures, there are moments where the villains are a bit stupider than you'd expect them to be. There's a bit where Rotor throws a rock to distract a SWAT bot craft, and it comes down and investigates it. But the difference is, instead of Rotor then being like, haha, stupid SWAT bot, and making a buffoon of them, no, tone remains tense, and they quickly rush over and steal the aircraft. Like, they treat it seriously, even if you think about it, like, it doesn't hang together perfectly. At least the tone is still there. So, yeah. I like that.
This episode's called Sonic and Sally, but the real Sally is stuck in a box the whole episode. I do like the visual of Sonic dragging the broken fake Sally after Bunny beats it up. I do like the visual of Sonic dragging the broken fake one around like a corpse.
It's kind of strange.
I imagine, taking a kid who just read Archie Sonic number 46 or whatever, and he thinks Sally is dead, and saying, here's Sonic dragging around Sally's body in the cartoon version of this comic.
Oh no, Devin, you're so evil. On a different note, at the end of the episode, this is the first time that Sally calls Sonic Hedgehog.
That's his last name, man.
No, it's not. There's a stupid name.
Maybe they couldn't get the rights cleared to call him Nicky Parlusier.
What?
You guys need to read some of the old weird manga.
Okay.
Alright then.
We will read it, but way, way later.
If you're gonna make a joke, it could have been
Old Jill V. Maurice?
Yes! I remembered their middle name, but I couldn't remember the other name. Thank you.
Yeah, well, don't worry about it, Bruce. You're gonna cringe. It's gonna be amazing.
I'm getting all of this information that I don't know how to process.
Good.
Anyway, decent episode other than the Tails thing I didn't like.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, solid.
Episode 3, Ultrasonic. Sonic and the Freedom Fighters journey to Robotnik's lab in hopes of deciphering his roboticizer system. While underground, Sonic spots his now roboticized Uncle Chuck aboard a Badlands-bound mine train and devises a plan for his rescue. By placing a power ring in Chuck's hands, Sonic breaks Robotnik's robot spell and is reunited with his uncle. Uncle Chuck anxiously warns Sonic of Robotnik's latest invention, the Energy Crystal, capable of destroying all life on Mobius.
That synopsis is straight up incorrect. He
Where did
didn't
I go wrong?
invent the power crystals. The power crystals are a natural part of Mobius that Robotnik is stealing to replace the power supply because he's running out of oil. Gosh.
God.
People really need to get their facts straight.
Roboticizing is very strange, I have to say. It's really sort of a fantasy thing. It's not really taken in any ways that are realistic, and the rules are kind of just there. They become clear, but they're strange. Like, apparently, earlier on, as Sally and Sonic are being chased around, Sonic's like, why aren't they shooting at us? It's like, oh, they're saving us for the roboticizer. So I guess you have to be alive to be roboticized.
I would assume so.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And then your mind is still in there somewhere so that the power ring, once again, a plot device, can bring back Uncle Chuck's consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's weird.
Are you just asking how the power ring thing works, or what?
Roboticization has always weirded me out, and I'm gonna bring up whenever it does something weird, like turning people to robots. Yeah, okay, that's fine. But then, like, I'll get into it more later. It's not too weird at this point, but we start to see the rules pop up, and they get a little stranger later on, in my opinion.
I will say what weirds me out is that Sonic says, Uncle Chuck invented these power rings, so maybe they'll jog his memory, which implies that, like, somehow his memory of making them would make him wake up. But no, it's the energy from it, because it works on more than just Chuck, I'm pretty sure.
Certainly in the comics. I don't know about in the show. I'll have to think. Yeah.
I guess they don't try it on anybody else in the show. And that's probably because if they did, it would lead to questions like, why did they not just stockpile a bunch of rings and then just go in, get all of the roboticized people, and lead a revolution?
I am pretty sure that the rings don't last forever.
That's probably true.
I'd have to think about it, but
my
I'm pretty
theory
sure
was
true.
that the rings only show up one at a time, so the one you pull out has to be used before the next one will appear.
That is also possible.
That also makes it make a lot more sense that it could have been something Chuck invented, because it's not just a source of infinite energy, it's a source of clean, renewable energy.
Right.
Oh, yeah, and that contrasts nicely with how this episode brings in a recurring theme. Robotnik is like sort of technology and advancement with no regard for the environment.
Yeah.
And so that contrasts nicely with him, renewable energy versus wrecking everything. So yeah, we get introduced to Chuck, and he's a real hero. He's like one of the most heroic characters. I mean, you rescue him, and literally the first thing is like, we could escape, but no, don't worry about me and the fact that I'm like unstable. We got to stop Robotnik's scheme and save the planet.
Yeah, he's in like fuck shit up mode from day one.
Great.
Antoine calls Rotor a gringo at one point in this episode.
That was strange.
I'm not sure if they knew that there were other contexts for that word.
Ooh.
It's very funny, though.
Okay, I am mad impressed at how this show, first as a joke, when Sonic is being like Narcissus, and he's like, oh, look, I am so handsome, and pulls out a mirror for no reason. You're like, did you really just bring along a mirror for that one gag? And I would have thought that, but then later he actually pulls it out and uses it to deflect a laser, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like there was actually a real reason for that to be there, and it wasn't just for a joke.
I was very happy to see that frame of Sonic looking in the mirror, because it's like Sally asked him, I don't remember what she asked him that makes him look in the mirror, but there's a frame where he looks like really sad looking at that mirror, and so people like to just, chroma key in, whatever pictures and just play. All around me are familiar faces, worn out places, worn out... But yeah, no, the fact that they have a gag that is also a minor plot device is very funny.
Mm-hmm. Another little detail I have to point out, At one part, there's a door that Bunny needs to open, and they're like, "Oh, Bunny, can you open it?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, sure." And then she opens it with her regular arm, not her robot arm, which means I guess Sally is just buff. Sorry, Bunny is just buff.
I didn't notice that. That's very funny. That must be a mistake, I guess? I don't know.
There are lots of little weird things here and there. Another thing is, as Sonic is running up to Chuck before their personality is restored, the door, like, closes in front of them and cuts them off before Sonic stops them. So it's like they were planning on leaving Chuck behind anyway, the rest of the robots, for some reason.
Oh.
That, I have to imagine, is a mistake.
Yeah, and it's funny, because this is still easily the best animated show out of the DK Animation trilogy.
Oh, 100%. I don't think Sonic's arms ever blue. Maybe I could be wrong. But they were blue so much in Adventures, and they are blue so much in Underground. Bugs me.
It's funny, because, you know, it makes me want to say, you know, that's why they finally made his arms blue for Boom, is so that coloring mistake would never happen. But then it's a CG show. You can't make that mistake in a CG show.
Right. Why are Sonic and Bunny so concerned about wrenching open the Dinobot's mouth? They could have just, like, jumped in right after Chuck, but instead there's, like, a whole sequence where they're fighting against it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what was up with that. They were trying to make it seem tense, but, like, you're either in or not. You know, you don't want to get chomped by the teeth on the outside, but there's no teeth on the inside.
Exactly, and there's a bit where it's closing in, but you can clearly see that even when it's fully closed, they won't be crushed. So I don't get what the problem is.
Well, but they'd have to duck down, Lauren. That would, like, ruin Sonic's pedicure.
Not ducking down. Oh, well, actually...
His back pedicure.
Well, if this is going based off the games, I learned from the games that if you crouch down into a small space and then get up, Sonic will just die because it counts as getting crushed.
Yeah.
That's the problem. I will say, that part is a little bit strange, but largely this show does do a good job at keeping things pretty tense. Once again, I give it another medal of, like, I sort of raise an eyebrow, but the tone is still consistent. Why the heck is there a robot that just has an off switch on its leg? That's awfully convenient. But they play it serious, and believe it or not, it's actually not easy to pull off. Like, they try to hit it, and then they're like, oh, let's try to distract it. And then it, like, picks up Rotor and is, like, going to shoot him in the face. And they turn off, like, a second before it does. So I'm like, okay, that was kind of a design flaw. But it didn't hinder storytelling.
It didn't make it too easy.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I think. I think that they created a cast of characters that are very short compared to most of the antagonists. And they needed some way for Rotor to hit an off switch. But, you know, they wanted to still have the robot be big. Whereas if it were, like, lower on his back, then, you know, he'd either have to jump or they'd have to make it smaller.
Yeah, I guess.
Although either way, it's like having it be on the leg just makes me think that, like, you know how you sometimes kick a table with, like, your pinky toe when it hurts?
Ooh, yeah.
Like, it would have that, but then it would just kill it or put it to sleep.
Right. It is so refreshing to see competent villains. A competent villainous force. Time and time again, you know, I'm convinced that, like, this Robotnik and these Badniks, I don't think that term comes into play in the show. This army of robots, I'm convinced that, yeah, this is a force that could take over Mobius. Because, like, without too much trouble, Chuck and the gang take over the giant dinosaur robot. Okay, Chuck had inside information. But surprisingly, the SWAT bots are able to take it in their stride and shoot out a bunch of ropes and grappling hooks and restrain it down. And I'm like, I'm impressed that they didn't all just, like, run away scared. Like, that would be what I would expect if this happened, like, in Adventures.
Well, and even more than that, it's like he takes over the world, and even though he still, quote-unquote, loses in each episode, it's not like they take the world back until the end of the show, sort of. It's always either a minor victory or a bittersweet ending, which is what it is in this episode, where they stop the crystal generator or whatever, but they can't take Uncle Chuck with them.
Right.
Exactly.
Which is the right way to do it, to have the heroes still win, but still have the villain be convincing.
Yeah, so, the pieces fit together. I don't have to make stupid theories about this show. It just works.
My god, it's like the people making this show cared about it.
Exactly.
Like, that's my ultimate, like, thesis for, like, our coverage of this show. Is not that it's the most amazing and flawless cartoon ever created, but that somebody cared, and that makes so much of a difference. compared to a lot of Adventures of Sonic stuff where it's just like, put him in a pirate world this time. Which, I accidentally referenced one of the better episodes of that show, but,
Point taken either way.
Alright, last episode for today. Episode 4, Sonic and the Secret Scrolls, which I had to stop myself from writing Sonic and the Secret Rings when I read that.
Yep, me too.
Sally, Rotor, Bunny, and Antoine take off in a homemade airplane, salvaged, whatever, bound for an ancient city hidden deep within the Great Mountains, while Sonic follows via his favorite transportation, his sneakers. Their quest is the Secret Scrolls that have great powers they hope to use in their struggle with Robotnik. To get the scrolls, the Freedom Fighters are confronted by a maze of booby traps and puzzles that test their intellect, strength, and courage. Things go from bad to worse when Robotnik shows up with a SWATbot team and demands the scrolls. Sorry, it says SWABbot in the description here. They were not paying that intern enough.
No. This is going to be a recurring theme in SatAM. Ancient Mobian lore. Mystery, intrigue about relics in the past, or whatever.
They really named the ancient city Maga.
Yeah, they did.
I checked the wiki, it's spelled that way too. Whatever, it was the 1990s, we're not going to dwell on it. This episode does have one very important element that recurs in the games all the time, and that's plane crashes.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
It kind of threw me through the loop for a second, but I noticed that Tails was there at the beginning, but then they just disappeared afterwards and didn't show up for the rest of the episode, which makes sense, but there's not a single line about him wanting to join or anyone telling him to stay behind, so I was just like, wait a second, wasn't Tails here at one point? I gotta be honest, I'm sorry, but this honestly isn't one of my favorite episodes. It's really sort of stuck on that whole, let's make some ancient mystery thing, but at the end of the day, it's just, they're puzzles, but they're really not all that interesting, and there's, tons of, esoteric rhetoric that doesn't really mean anything, and it doesn't really add up to much, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's an okay watch, but I wouldn't say it's A+ material for this show. They've got shadows that turn things invisible, a chair that flies, and some really strong winds. And it's it leaves me thinking, what kind of society would design these trials? In other shows with, episodes like this, there's a really good episode of Avatar where they, go to, the Sun Temple and they have to brave the trials of that. But in that, each of the trials has some foundation in the culture of the people that they're trying to get information from. And I think that if they had taken that approach to this, it might have made for something more interesting than just video game trials, basically.
Yeah, probably. It's interesting that there's no Robotnik for a lot of the episode, and when I first saw this, I'm like, he's just not in every episode, but he does show up eventually to crash the party.
Yeah, they use the temple stuff to sort of defeat him, and at the end they're like, oh my gosh, is Robotnik dead? I don't know, man. Maybe he really is dead. And it's like, one, no, he's not. We as the audience will know that, and they show him at the end. But at the same time, it's really weird, because the heroes never find out.
Well, I mean, he shows up next episode, so...
I know, but they never act like, oh, what a surprise.
I hadn't thought about that.
I'm just imagining you cut off the last minute and a half of this episode, and it's like, there we go, boys, that's the last episode. They defeated Robotnik at the Ancient Temple.
Right. I definitely enjoy this more once Robotnik shows up, because then the episode seems to have more of a purpose and be less artificial. There's an actual concrete menace and not just puzzles. Also, I have to point out that I recognize that hand laser that Robotnik has because it shows up in the comics too. Not a terribly important element, but just something that I'm like, oh, cool.
It's weird. It's it's showing so much familiar iconography, but in a context that's now it makes way more sense.
Yeah. And there's a fun little moment where I don't really know what Robotnik is doing. Who's he kidding? But at the same time, he sells it, so I'll roll with it. When it's just Sonic and Robotnik in a chamber on their own, and he's like, "Oh, it's just you and me, hedgehog." And he tries to shoot him a few times, but I mean, he's Sonic; he's never gonna hit him. I still enjoy it, even so, though, because Robotnik always sells it.
Like they were gonna duke it out or something, which they didn't.
It's giving me Endgame vibes, man.
Yeah. I appreciate the part of Endgame where Sonic fights Thanos.
Not that Endgame!
Yeah, I know. I do like that Robotnik just tries to shoot Sonic with a gun. That's very upfront of him.
I mean,
yeah.
If it works, it works.
He only does that, 2 other times, like, throughout most of the franchise, I would say. I guess I'm remembering, I don't know about the British comics and even some of Archie, really, but, like, the only immediate other time that I can think of is Lost World, and that's friggin' 20 years later.
Maybe it was inspiration.
One of those things people always joke about, like, oh, what if the villain just used a gun or whatever? But
What if Harry Potter just carried a Glock?
right. But no, the idea is, for whatever reason, in this universe, they're laser guns, not bullet guns, so they travel at a speed that the eye can follow, and so they're just not as effective. It's just
In
a stranger
fairness, maybe the
disbelief,
reason he
man.
doesn't use it is because it doesn't work very well.
Maybe he's
Yeah.
just got really bad aim.
No, Sonic's just too fast.
Or I guess that makes more sense.
Overall, not a terrible episode, but just kind of mid.
I mean,
Yeah.
a show can't just be all bangers. It's got to have some mid.
And on that note, we are done. Hope you guys watching enjoyed. Feel free to share, comment, and subscribe if you did. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, you can always reach us at deepdivezonepod@gmail.com or at deepdivezone on Twitter. Have a great night, and we'll see you next week.